Sorry.
Hello, everyone. I'm Afyon Ibok. I'm the clerk of the board, and I call the February special meeting of the King County Regional Homelessness Authority's Governing Board to order. Thank you to the Seattle Public Library for hosting the in-person location today. We begin every meeting by grounding ourselves in our theory of change, which reads, if we create a homelessness response system that centers people with lived experience of homelessness, then we will be able to respond to the needs and eliminate inequities in order to end homelessness for all. Next, we have our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge King County is located on the unceded traditional land of the Coast Salish peoples. We honor this land and its people past and present, and we are committed to directing funding and resources to organizations led by and in support of Native and Indigenous people. Now I will take roll call. Member Zahalai?
Present.
Member Barone?
Present.
Member Fain?
Here.
Member Aviva?
Present.
Member Wilson?
Present.
Member Foster?
Here.
Member Rink?
Present.
Member Bracken?
Present.
Member Jang?
Present.
Ed Prince will be absent today, and Mayor Backus will be absent today. Member Hay?
Here.
Member Robertson?
Here.
We have quorum with 11 people. So the meeting, we can continue with the meeting. Our first item is electing co-chairs for the governing board pursuant to Article 3, Section 3.02 of the KCRHA Governing Board bylaws. Are there any nominations for co-chairpersons? I see a hand from Member Barone.
I nominate Mayor Wilson and Executive Sahalai to be co-chairs of the KCRHA Governing Board.
Thank you. Seeing no other nominations, is there a motion to vote to elect Member Zahalai and Member Wilson to be the co-chairpersons of the board?
So moved.
Oh.
There's a motion by Barone and a second by Rink. All those in favor of electing members Wilson and Zahalai to be co-chairpersons of the board, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Members Wilson and Zahalai have been elected as co-chairpersons of the KCRHA Governing Board. For today's meeting, Member Wilson will serve as chair. Member Wilson or Chair Wilson, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. I am delighted to be here as a new member and delighted to serve as your chair today. Okay, so the next up is our consent agenda. We have two items on the consent agenda today. The approval of our December 2025 Governing Board meeting minutes and the approval of the 2026 meeting schedule. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve.
And is there a second?
I second.
Okay, the motion has been moved and seconded. So the consent agenda is the things that are expected to be uncontroversial and not require discussion. So if anyone is wondering what these things are, or thinks they do require discussion, now is your time to speak up. And we can move things off the consent agenda. Hearing nothing, we are going to vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, the consent agenda has passed. Good job. Okay, so next up on the agenda, we have our monthly CEO report from Dr. Kelly Kinnison. Kelly, handing it over to you.
Thank you, Chair Wilson. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm thrilled to be with this wonderful group of leaders for our first 2026 board meeting. I want to start by just sharing some of the highlights from the end of 2025. That was our first year of the simplified governance structure. I know that was a very big lift for some of you and your teams, and we very much appreciate the dedication to really good government principles and making things as efficient and effective as possible, and making sure the clear lines of sort of responsibility and accountability are in place for our homelessness response system. I also want to share the innovation in our severe weather response, which was standing up an RFQ to pre-identify agencies so that we could rapidly activate emergency shelter and support services during severe weather events and get money from our various funders out as quickly as possible once it was available. We were partnering with our local elected officials across the region and providers like Lake City Partners, Low Income Housing Institute, Salvation Army, and Urban League. We have 4 seasonal shelters open as of the end of 2025, and that adds 100 beds per night across 4 neighborhoods when we have those severe weather activations. Also want to share our thanks for our East King County partnership. We entered into a new agreement with your approval with the City of Bellevue and City of Redmond to administer their severe weather funding for East King County. This leverages, system improvements that we've made and alignment with the 5-year plan, and really builds on the existing relationship that we have with North King County cities, Bothell, Kenmore, Lake Forest Park, Shoreline, and Woodinville. The other steps, just to highlight for you, are our financial efficiency and transparency. Reliable operations matter, execution matters, and by the end of January of this year, we had completed 98% of our nearly 170 contract renewals that we need to do in a very short amount of time. This is a significant improvement over past years and is greatly enhanced by our move from a legacy system to Salesforce for grants management. And we've heard a lot of positive things from the community and providers about that new process. Although, of course, there's more work that we could do there. I've had the chance to meet with a number of you about how we focus in 2026. And this year is really about strengthening our regional services baseline. We want to add more shelter quickly, including 80 beds that we have online or coming online in the first quarter. We want to address racial disparities, which continue to grow in many sectors, including the homelessness response system, supporting sub-regional needs, and advancing accountability and collaboration through community-wide engagement. And we have some plans for that we're excited to share with you at our next meeting. We also continue to work with our partners on the possible reduction in federal funding. As some of you know, Monday, HUD filed an emergency motion that would allow them to issue a new 2025 notice of funding announcement, and that would have them making competitive awards for grants that would begin in Q3 and Q4 of this year. While our Q1 and Q2 grants would be automatically renewed, they account for only about 11 million of the 65 million that we were awarded under the existing notice of funding announcement that we are working under, and that there are many lawsuits in progress to make sure that we get to continue to work under that previous competition. The HUD has asked the court to rule on this motion by March 2nd, so we should know more soon about if that is going to be successful. We also started the year by doing our biennial point in time count. This count provides an estimate of how many people are experiencing homelessness on a single night in King County, and it lets us do all kinds of analysis to support decision-making, understand our population, and get the key characteristics that we need to make sure we have good service match in our system. We conducted over 2,000 surveys, and I'm very grateful to the 200 volunteers, 13 community partners who dedicated their time this year to the count. We know that it takes a while to make sure those data are clean and clear, and we'll be doing analysis that leads to a report in early summer 2026 with briefings for you all as those numbers become available. And we're working hard to use the data that we have better. That includes the decision-making support that we provide to you and other elected leaders, to the public to understand the issues we're grappling with and engage them with the solutions, and doing some dashboards, including how we're doing against the 5-year plan that was adopted by KCRHA in our community. We also are adding other good government steps in terms of increasing transparency and accountability in our contracting processes. We're continuing to improve collaborations with providers on their portfolios of work that are held by KCRHA, often across many funding streams and many contracts. As a public agency, the resources entrusted to us go through competitive processes, and it's our responsibility to ensure those resources are deployed in our system in a timely way. We know this is a change from how things have sometimes worked in the past, and we're committed to the success of our region's providers. We'll continue to increase the amount of time we spend providing technical assistance and capacity building within the system, up to the point of the resources we have available. I'll turn it back to you, Chair Wilson, for any questions.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Kinnison. Are there any questions from members on the monthly CEO report? I see Member Rink's hand.
Thank you, Mayor Wilson, and thank you for the update, CEO Kinnison. I'm pleased to hear about the prospect of dashboarding on the 5-year plan, and certainly would love to know about cadence that you're thinking about for that. Really excited to see that, we won't have a plan that just sits on a shelf, but rather a living document, and we're really benchmarking our progress. Is there anything you could share about cadence?
The team is getting some ideas together, and we hope to present those to you kind of early on, so that you can decide what metrics might be most helpful, what presentation makes sense for our board, what might be public facing. So drawing up some options now, and then we'll have a work plan for those, but want to get that up and live as soon as we can.
That's good to hear. Thank you.
Okay, and I see Member Barone's hand.
Thank you, Chair Wilson. Not so much a question, but I just wanted to express to CEO Kinnison and to the KCRHA team my gratitude for all the work on the point-in-time count. I had the opportunity to serve very briefly as one of the 200 volunteers that you pointed out, and just got to see that work on the ground level, and very important, but also just appreciated all the work that people did to make that process effective, and also a sobering experience, I will say, as a board member, to see the need that many people in the community see, obviously day to day, but to be able to engage in that process was something that I take heightens my responsibility here on the board. So I just wanted to express my gratitude to all the team, because I thought that it was well handled, and wanted to express that publicly to you and to the KCRHA team. So thank you for that.
Okay, thank you, Member Barone. I see Member Foster's hand.
Thanks so much, Mayor Wilson. Thank you, Director Kinnison. I just wanted to revisit the update around the ongoing changes with the federal government. As we know, this has been changing and changing and changing. And so our latest understanding, just to sort of reaffirm what I heard from you, Director Kinnison, is that with the $65 million that we've been awarded, there's $11 million that we were anticipating in Q1 and Q2. And given that the feds are going to have asked to reissue a NOFA for Q3 and 4, that leaves us with the remaining $54 million in limbo, assuming that we hear an affirmation of that request in the ruling expected in early March. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any further questions for CEO Kinnison? Okay, seeing nothing, that now brings us to the public comment portion of our meeting. Thank you to the Seattle Public Library for hosting today's in-person location. If you're here with us in person, please sign up to comment with Afiang. If you are providing comment via Zoom, please raise your hand now and you will be called in the order received. Each commenter will be able to speak for 2 minutes. Public comment will be open for 15 minutes or until no others would like to speak, whichever is sooner. We do ask public commenters to please keep your comments related to an item on the agenda. Afiang, will you please open the public comment?
Yes, Chair. There is no one in person, and so we'll be moving to virtual. And our first virtual commenter is Sharon Lee. Sharon, you've now been unmuted.
Thank you. This is Sharon Lee. Dear Governing Board, we would like to ask the Governing Board to take some time to investigate recent events and to evaluate our concern about the procurement process and contracting. We believe Lehigh has been unjustly harmed by CEO Kelly Kennison and Jeff Sims, where the procurement process seems to be irregular or even weaponized. And we have contracts that are being delayed and stalled and additional problems. So we were awarded $5.9 million in the non-congregate shelter RFP to build 2 tiny house villages. In December, we made great progress and completed Olympic Hills Village with 45 tiny houses. Thank you, Mayor, for attending. Now, there was a serious problem. Lehigh did not get a contract from RHA for building the village until January, after the village was completed. Therefore, Lehigh had to float all the construction expenses due to RHA having contracting delays. And then when we started working on the second village, we met with the city on permitting, and we were working on a King County site. And the King County site got a little delayed, and then we had a backup site with Mount Baker Housing Association. And so we did find a site. We signed a letter of intent to lease the land from Mount Baker. And then when we sent information to Jeff Sims, he did not write us back. We did not hear for weeks until we got a letter rescinding $3 million of our award. So for RHA to suggest that we are late, I think that is simply outrageous. We completed a village, we worked to secure King County or Mount Baker site, and all the time not getting a contract. And we also want to show that we have a letter that we will send to you that showed that the regular process that took place.
Our next commenter is Marta Kidane. Marta, you have just been unmuted. Marta, can you speak into your microphone?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
My name is Marta Kidane, and I'm the Community Engagement Manager at Low Income Housing Institute. I'm here today to raise an issue faced not only by our organization, but across partners in the housing and shelter sector. As a longtime shelter provider, Lehigh has had an extensive history with KCRHA. This relationship has been fraught with KCRHA delays in contracting, reports getting lost, errors, and lack of responsiveness. In one example, we were notified of audits for 14 tiny house shelter contracts in early 2024. While the initial findings were inconsistent, an 11-month appeal process successfully resulted in all findings being reversed and resolved. This revealed significant errors in KCRHA's auditing procedures, including the loss of uploaded documentation, delayed communication, and inaccurate findings. These issues have also been experienced by our fellow shelter providers, including Solid Ground Executive Director Shalimar Gonzalez, who has asked Lehigh to raise this issue on their behalf. Their problems include delays in signing contracts, confusion over billing, lack of timely responses to emails, and a 1-year delay in audit response, coupled with findings that cannot be rectified before the next audit period. Lehigh understands the need to audit and ensure contractors are in compliance with federal and state funding requirements. Requiring us to upload the same documentation 4 years in a row is redundant, punitive, and extremely time-consuming for our staff and KCRHA's audit staff. These inconsistent policies create undue administrative strain and risk inaccurate findings that do not reflect provider performance. In April 2025, Lehigh met with KCRHA leadership to discuss how KCRHA can improve the monitoring process, at which time best practices were shared by Lehigh staff, including a discussion around a master service agreement for shelters with an identical HR, accounting, and safety policies. The outcome should have reduced redundancies, but nothing has changed. We remain concerned about the poor quality of responsiveness and service from KCRHA. Thank you.
Chair, there are no other commenters on the virtual line.
Okay, thank you, and thank you to our commenters. With that, the public comment is closed. So next up, we have Resolution 2026-01, a resolution to approve the 2026 budget. And I'm going to be handing it over to CEO Kelly Kinnison, who will be briefing us on the 2026 budget on behalf of Interim Chief Business Officer Tiffany Brooks.
Thank you, Chair Wilson, and Afyang, I appreciate you putting our slides up. This is a continuation of the briefing we started in December and have tried to update and get information to our new board members in time for this meeting. I know many of you are very familiar with this content. Others of you are just getting it. So I will do my best to not fill the very big shoes left by Tiffany Brooks and hit the highlights of our 2026 budget briefing. First slide, Afyang. So the budget timeline is something that we've tried to streamline with the new governance process. There's probably still some work to be done. We start working on the budget with our governing board members and Seattle and King County staff in human services departments, usually in March or April. We work together until the Seattle mayor and King County executive release their budgets. And then, of course, both councils do their work on those budgets. And we get approved budgets usually in early December. The amount of resources that KCRHA has input on is very small at this time. So I would say between 10 and 20% of our budget. There's some decision making here at the agency. Otherwise, it is funding for contracts that currently exist and will be either continued or ended based on the funding that is provided by not only King County and City of Seattle, but by HUD, Continuum of Care, and the severe weather funding we receive from North King County and East King County, as well as money that comes directly to us from the state for the encampment resolution program housing that is continuing on. So really what we're responsible for here at KCRHA is making sure we have a balanced administrative budget and communicating with the board about what that looks like and sort of the cost of doing business. Next slide. So this is what we call our KCRHA budget. And I know some of you, I just had a light bulb moment with you. Thank you so much for your feedback as I've gotten to talk about this with new folks with fresh eyes. This actually represents our initial master services agreement, which is the name of the agreement between, in this case, it's with the City of Seattle and KCRHA to then administer these funds on their behalf. And, you know, budgets are complicated. And so at the time of the first master services agreement, we get certain amounts from that approved budget from council that are coming to us. And our very diligent team tries to keep up with those exact numbers. And I think that's gotten a little bit confusing over time. So I know I got some questions about Our total approved budget as presented in December was 205 million. This chart shows 202 million, almost 203. And the difference there is just a little bit of funding that was in sort of that KCRHA pot approved by City Council that has not come to us in the form of the Master Services Agreement at this time. And that's quite normal that, you know, the city is managing how those funds are actually allocated. So I think we'll stick with budgets going forward so that folks are working with the same numbers, and then we can do actuals as you have time and interest to track those. Nothing changes very dramatically. And of course, we provide actuals to our funders every month, if not more often. But appreciate the clarity on mixing up sometimes in these slides our budget as approved by councils and our actuals that are being worked on day to day with our funders. Next slide. So this shows budget by funding source. You can see that we're managing a lot of funding sources across all of our funders. They all have different requirements, different codes for different services. And so getting to a point now where we've trained all of our staff and have layered these together appropriately for use in Salesforce is an accomplishment we're really proud of. It's just as complicated as it looks. Next slide. Budget by funder. Again, thank you. Funders, City of Seattle provides 58% of our budget, King County 21%, and Continuum of Care federal funding is 13%, and 8% comes from Department of Commerce, with some other severe weather funding and philanthropy funding for one of our data positions. Next slide. This shows funding by program. That's been very steady over time. Next slide. This is the comparison from 2025 to 2026. Again, fairly consistent. And again, these program definitions shift slightly over time depending on where funding is put in budgets. But we are really seeing, you know, maintaining the investments to keep the housing homelessness response system is very consistent in our region. Next slide. So this is the budgets that some of you are more familiar with seeing. So the adopted budget by City of Seattle. This includes new non-congregate enhanced shelter beds and funds for the runaway and homeless youth programs. Next slide. And this is showing just the difference in the MSA numbers. Next slide. This shows our total City of Seattle budget. Next slide. There are also some budget actions we know, again, you are very familiar with, including HSDs, the proviso for HSD to work on KCRHA's administrative shortfall, which I'll get to in just a moment, and then some stabilization funds for runaway and homeless youth support. Next slide. There's also the reserve to mitigate federal funding impacts to shelter and housing, which is $20 million, which we all know is still actively in play. Next slide. Then moving on to King County, this is the adopted budget for KCRHA by council. Next slide. This is our MSA budget. So what the staff are telling us is in our master services agreement, which I think we have a draft of now. Next slide. The King County budget by program type. Next slide. And then some other King County budget actions of interest. There are a number of shelter and housing investments that we're very appreciative of, council additions for shelter and rental supports, some potential funding for continuum of care backfill. Next slide. And then this shows program types funded by our other sources, including COC, federal funds, and our East King County and North King County ILA. Next slide. Then I want to share our admin budget. I know we've been talking to you all for some time about some legacy issues we have that are creating shortfalls in our administrative budget. These are the rates that we get for each funding source with a total of 7% admin rate. We are very committed to being as lean as possible, and we know that every dollar that we can needs to go to services and providers, and to provide just the necessary staffing to support the necessary oversight and actions and communication that we're charged with. It's a very lean admin budget, and we would like for KCRHA to be operating to your full expectations, and it's difficult at this level. Next slide. Right now, we are predicting potentially $800,000 to $1 million in administrative shortfall for 2026. That's coming pretty directly from our interest that we accrue on a negative balance in our account, which is a result of our funding model, which we did some intensive briefing on with the board last year. We start at zero, we pay providers, go negative, and then we get reimbursed from our funders. That's true of all of the funding that we receive across sources. And initially, in the startup days of KCRHA, there were some cash advances to kind of, I think the idea was sort of, mitigate that. And over time, those have slowed down and decreased. We did work with City of Seattle last year to make sure that those are coming frequently, as long as we're meeting the requirements to get those cash advances. But we are still earning interest, and that hadn't been budgeted before last year because it sort of became an issue last year. So continue to work with you and our partners on our funding model. And it really is a structural gap in how the agency was set up. Next slide. Yeah, this is, again, really affects everything across the agency. We've prioritized keeping everything that faces providers intact as much as possible, which means sometimes you all see the delays and the short staffing, but we're very much trying to keep providers from experiencing that. I think we have delayed further updates in Salesforce and anything else that really would be good things for us to have to do better for our community, but the nice to haves are sort of not on the table right now. So we very much agree with the funding going to programs during this time. Next slide. So this is, again, recap of our budget slide. Next slide. Wanted to note we finished our state audit for the year. There was no material findings. We've had a history of very good audit findings, and we will start getting ready for the next one very soon. Next slide. And I will happily try to take your questions with Tiffany not at my side.
Thank you, Dr. Kinnison. And so we are going to be voting on a resolution to approve the 2026 annual budget. Hopefully people have that resolution somewhere. But basically it just says the governing board hereby approves the 2026 annual budget in the form attached here to in attachment A, and this resolution shall take effect immediately upon passage. Okay, so I'm going to open it up for questions and discussion now, and I see a hand from Member Fain.
Thank you so much. Just going back to the two different budgets that we received, and just so I'm tracking this correctly, the difference between the two budgets reflects an update from the estimated amounts from the master services agreement versus the actual amounts you received. Is that right?
Very close. So councils, in terms of money coming from Seattle and King County, what council approves is what our budget becomes. And then the Human Services Department at Seattle, the Community and Human Services Department at King County, like have to manage, right, all of that budgeting internally. And then they start basically entering into agreements with us to administer the KCRHA part of that budget. And so depending on how they're balancing out all those funding sources, we may get the funding in several tranches. We may get some and then get it pulled back. There's some fluctuation throughout the year. And I would think of that as sort of our actuals. So, you know, I think we're all kind of used to that language of budget versus actuals, and then you true them up over the course of the year. And again, my role is really to make sure we're following all of those MSA requirements, and in particular that our administrative budget is on point, because, you know, we don't want to spend outside what we've been authorized to spend. So we do check-ins with our funders every month to look at those actuals, how they're tracking, to get updates on if they're ready to send another contract to us or the new money that council has provided to us. And so that's why there's some fluctuation throughout the year. It's not dramatic fluctuation typically. And that's something, you know, we always sort of update the board on if we get, you know, a new project from one of our funders or something like that. In some cases that has to be approved. If it's not from one of our regular funders, something like a new initiative would have to be approved by the board. But the budget is really what is set by the councils, working off of the executive's budgets.
Okay.
Does that answer
Chair,
your
can I ask a
question?
follow-up to that?
Mhm.
Thank you. So then is there a process in which you report back to the board or provide a reconciliation summary? I don't think a monthly update is needed, but if there's a process that's already built in so that we can kind of track these changes over time, is that something that's in place? Or if not, can we put that into place?
Yeah, absolutely. We can do a quarterly budget versus actuals report for board members who aren't already getting it, you know, with their funder hat on. Happy
I would
to do
love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And next up, I see Member Zahalai's hand.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Dr. Kinnison. I thought you did a great job filling in for the budget director. A couple of questions on my end. I wanted to ask about the administrative budget shortfall. I think you mentioned that it's between $800,000 and $1 million shortfall. I didn't see that actual number reflected in the presentation. Is that somewhere in the presentation where we could see that laid out? You know, here are the total revenues, here are the total costs. This is the difference. Did I miss that in the presentation, or is that not?
Afyon, can we go back to the administrative funding slide? So executive, this is our, oh, you're right, it does not have the comparison. I can update this chart for you to show budget versus projected.
Yep, that would be super helpful. And also if there's any more information about the risk of that shortfall growing. I think you mentioned it could grow. Is that right?
That's right. So as many of you know we're working with the labor committee members on bargaining, and so the result of that may have some budget implications. Frankly, those aren't massive. The real challenge is solving for the negative balance that we carry over time. We're trying lots of different strategies to try to address that. Really appreciate the thinking that's gone into that so far. Folks on your executive team, Executive Zahalai, have just been really fantastic and, pushing us to find, what's the solution? How are we going to come together? And so we're hoping to have more on that this spring as we work through what the options might be.
Thank you. And then I did see a really helpful slide showing what the theoretical levers could be for addressing this shortfall and closing the gap. At what point can we see the actual plan, the specific plan for which levers are being proposed to be pulled for closing that gap? Because I'm going to vote for this budget because I don't want us to disrupt services. I know we've already executed contracts. We want to make sure that our unhoused neighbors get the services that they need, the roofs over their heads that they need. But we also have an obligation to balance the budget and creating a plan for doing that. And so when can we expect the specific plan?
So the strategy that we've been working under is to continue our almost universal hiring freeze. We do have a handful of backfill positions that we need to follow on hiring with. Those are folks who have retired since we did our last restructure. We plan to do potentially some additional restructuring, and we're looking at that at the end of Q2. We've held off on any commitments of funding to anything administratively, including sort of those, Salesforce implementation things that we wanted to propose. And then we'll work with our funders at mid-year to figure out how is the projection updated and what are the trade-offs the board will need to choose from in terms of where we reduce capacity at KCRHA.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next up, I see Member Rink's hand.
Thank you, Mayor Wilson, and thank you all for this presentation. Thank you, colleagues, also for the thoughtful questions. You definitely covered some of the outstanding questions I had, but I actually wanted to use this bit of time to offer just a comment on the budget, in full recognition that in many ways, big decisions around KCRHA's budget were, as you stated, CEO Kinnison, made when city and county went through their respective budget processes. I think what I'd like to draw attention to for a moment is just on what I'm seeing is page 21. If we can go to the page that demonstrates just KCRHA's budget by program type. Fabulous. Wait. We were just there. I was actually thinking, okay, I'll show print copy, the one where we have the table that demonstrates program type and then different funder type. But while we're getting there, I'll just speak kind of my remarks because I think there's some element of misconception around what we're taking up here as a governing committee, because in many ways our decision points, again, have already been made, but the fundamental piece around the size of each of these buckets and how we divvy up these slices, those decisions haven't been taken up in years. In our respective budget processes, we've taken up actions to grow a little bit each of these slices from respective needs. I know Councilmember Baron and I took up budget action to fill a funding gap made by federal and state budget cuts to make sure that we could keep youth and young adult homelessness going. But the matter, I'm sorry, this is not quite the slide I was hoping we could have up. If we can go to, I'm seeing page 21 in my print copy. But I might be there. I know there were a couple of different versions. This one, perfect. Thank you. So what I'm talking about is related to each of these rows, in essence, to each of these programs and fundamentally the slices of this pie. And I want to offer on the table, especially as our first meeting of the governing committee this year, that it is my desire, and I hope the desire of this body, to think fundamentally around the size of each of these slices and take up the rebid of our system to really think thoughtfully about how we're implementing system change. This is why I'm grateful that the agency is taking up a dashboarding exercise on the 5-year plan, but also want to lift up that there are a number of things within that plan that offer guidance on how we would re-procure the system. Elements that were clearly identified gaps in our system when it comes to serving Black and Native folks, when it comes to serving our trans community, for example. And so I want to lift that up and say for this year, it is my hope that we can take a serious conversation around rebid and be very clear that we know there are funding gaps. Appreciation again to KCRHA's team and the many folks in this call that have been engaged in a conversation around the continuum of care funding. The loss of those federal funds would be devastating for our region. So I want to be able to hold those two things as we're taking up further discussion this year around KCRHA's budget and fundamentally what services we are funding and thinking about those system changes. So thank you, colleagues, for indulging me on that. I just think it's really important that as we're talking about this budget, we also bring up this matter of like how we are divvying up and funding each of these different program areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Rink. Next up, I see Member Foster's hand.
Thank you so much, Mayor Wilson. And again, thanks to CEO Kennison and the team for this presentation. I wanted to just follow up on something. I think it was Member Fain who brought up the questions around the actuals and the budget versus the actuals. I know there was some discussion of like potentially getting into sort of quarterly budget reports. I think I wanted to lift up, this piece that Councilmember Rink just brought up in terms of how much of the budget we lock in before it goes over to KCRHA. And I'd love to have the opportunity to kind of explore other approaches to make sure we get to budget clarity before we say, hey, we want to do a quarterly budget update on the budget versus actuals, because it may be that there are other places where we'll get more juice for our squeeze, if you will. So I'd love the opportunity to explore that. And I see Councilmember Barone's hand is up following mine. I know there may be other ideas on the table for how we can ensure that we have that really strong oversight, as well as that we are looking back at our own practices as the city and the county and how we contribute to some of the hot spots or the challenges in the KCRHA budget.
Okay, thank you, Member Foster. Next up, Member Barone.
Thank you, Chair Wilson. I appreciate the comments that people have been made, and just to follow up on Member Foster's comment, I think I've started a conversation with a few of you about the idea of creating a finance subcommittee to help look at these issues. It's just, it's kind of a common practice on boards to have smaller groups to be able to focus on particular areas. So I do think that's a relevant conversation. I know we didn't have time to do it this month, but I'm hoping that in the next meeting we can talk about ways that we can implement some of the changes that we hope to, just the new functioning of the board, to make sure that we're complying with the duties that we set for ourselves in the ILA. So I do want to follow up on that conversation. I wanted to add just a couple more things. So one, I just want to highlight, Mayor Wilson pointed out that the resolution that we're voting on, and just for the record, I want to make sure that we all know that the language of the resolution that was in some of the packets earlier has changed. And I noticed that it's actually the outdated version is on the website. And so for the community's clarity on what we're voting on, the language is as Mayor Wilson stated it, not as it's reflected on the version on the website. So I just want to make sure we all know what we're voting on in a minute. And then my actual question that I have for CEO Kennison is on the COC numbers that we saw that we see on the screen right now on the continuum of care money. And I just want to make sure that we're clear with the community, because of the comments that we've talked about, the discussion earlier about the lawsuit and the challenges with the federal funding. CEO Kennison, could you just go over again what the assumptions are of the amounts that are included in this proposed budget? Are we assuming like no changes at the federal level? Are we making any assumptions here of any potential cuts? It would be helpful to have that clarified.
Thank you so much, Member Barone, for that question. So the HUD Continuum of Care column on this slide shows the amount that KCRHA administers. As many of you know, the county continues to administer about $40 million for permanent supportive housing contracts. And so that is not reflected in this slide, although also part of what is at risk for our entire region's continuum, the county's entire continuum. This budget assumes no changes to continuum of care funding for 2026. So we would need to address changes if they were to be, legally enacted by HUD.
Great. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. And I put myself in the queue next here. I just wanted to express support for Member Barone's proposal for creating a finance committee. I think that makes a lot of sense. So yeah, hope to see that as something that we can move forward with. And then also just, I think, to also add to Member Zahalai's points about the administrative gap, I would also love to see just some further explanation at a future meeting of the steps that have been taken to try to close that gap, and just some options for how we can do that, including figuring out how to make that work with existing resources. And yeah, so I don't know if there's a question there, except for maybe just about when it would be realistic to see those options.
Absolutely. We can put those together based on what we know now for our next board meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, next up, I see Member Aviva's hand.
Thank you. And thank you, CEO Kinnison, for the report today. I also thought you did a great job. I wanted to make a request that it actually speaks to something another member spoke to, but I would like to see the reporting on the data disaggregated. Perhaps I would like to make a suggestion for quarterly reports on exactly, especially with funding instability happening, who is being most impacted, what communities, as we work to support our communities that are experiencing homelessness. And then the other piece is I wanted to thank you for including in one of the packets for us the impact over the next 3 years in terms of some of the administration budget impacts, as that deficit will be increasing. And so I would also like to welcome future discussions on the long-term strategy so that we're not increasing, but we are coming to balanced budget, especially when we can anticipate that the budget deficit will be increasing.
Thank you. And next up, I see Member Jiang's hand.
Great, thank you, Chair Wilson. I want to echo some thoughts that I've heard from my other fellow members here. First of all, I will be supporting this budget. As mentioned, most of the funding allocation decisions have been made based on the budgeting processes between King County and the City of Seattle, and so, kind of we are where we are right now. I definitely agree with Member Foster's point that we want to see if there's a way that we can actually have a bit more flexibility in the budget, especially with regards to, prioritizing the most effective programs. My understanding is that later this year, there's going to be, some new dashboarding and data on metrics related to each of the service providers. So I really look forward to seeing that and seeing how we can make sure that we're, prioritizing the best use of our dollars to the services that the data shows are the most effective. And I think, that can feed into hopefully the budgeting decisions made next year and thereafter. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, if there's no further questions or discussion, I'm going to remind us all, first of all, on what we're voting here. So we're looking at resolution number 2026-01, and the resolved portion of that reads, now therefore it be resolved by the Governing Board of the King County Regional Homelessness Authority, Section 1. The Governing Board hereby approves the 2026 annual budget in the form attached hereto in Attachment A, And Section 2, this resolution shall take effect immediately upon passage, passed by a 2/3 majority of the governing board pursuant to the terms of the interlocal agreement at a special meeting held the 20th day of February 2026. So that's what we're voting on here. I'm going to call for a motion in a second, although really a motion in a second should happen before we do the discussion, but it's in my script. So is there a motion to pass resolution number 2026-01?
So moved.
Okay, and a second. Okay, I heard a second. Okay, any further discussion on resolution 2026-01? Hearing nothing. Afian, could you take the roll?
Yes, Chair. Chair Wilson,
Yay.
Member Zahalai,
Aye.
Member Barone,
Aye.
Member Fain,
Aye.
Member Aviva,
Aye.
Member Foster,
Yes.
Member Rink,
Yes.
Member Bracken,
Aye.
Member Jiang,
Aye.
Member Robertson,
Aye.
and Member Hay.
Aye.
Chair, a unanimous yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all. Great. So we're moving along in our agenda then to resolution 2026-02, approving the 5-year plan addendum. And we're today joined by KCRHA Legislative Policy Analyst Emily Grossman and Legislative Affairs Analyst Remy Gola, and they will be briefing us on the 5-year plan addendum. Take it away.
Thank you, Mayor Wilson. Let me share my screen. Assuming that is looking okay for folks. Okay. Everyone can see that? Yes, okay.
Emily, we can see it, but we see it in like a weird formatting. I don't know if there's it's looking like vertical. I don't know if it's just me.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yes, same here.
All right, let me switch it to my one moment.
It was in Instagram dimensions.
I promise it wasn't it was in my my gaming, it was on my gaming screen, which I use occasionally for work. So one moment, I'm gonna switch things around and okay. Try this one. Actually, Afyon, can you try to run the presentation for me?
Yes, Emily, give me 1 second.
Perfect, thank you. That will be easier. I don't have the best home setup. I appreciate it. Okay.
Can everybody see?
Thanks, Afyang. I can see it. I think we're good. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Emily Grossman, and as Mayor Wilson mentioned, I'm a legislative policy analyst at KCRHA. I'm going to take us briefly through this 5-year addendum presentation. I'll start by sharing framing of the purpose of the addendum and then move to the technicalities of what the addendum entails. I worked with the City of Seattle and King County on data collection for the addendum, and so did Remy, who is also present today. So we can attempt to answer any outstanding questions that you have about the plan or the data. Hopefully you've all had a chance to take a look at the document prior to this as well. Okay, next slide, please, Afyang. Great. So as the entity leading our region's response to homelessness, KCRHA develops and implements the 5-year strategic plan for addressing and reducing homelessness that is required by state law. Council Member Rink, that's RCW 185C. Our current plan was finalized and adopted in 2023. The following year, in 2024, the Department of Commerce released new guidance for jurisdictions' 5-year plans with new requirements. So the initial guidance was issued in 2019. We came into it late. We developed our plan, and then the following year, Commerce renewed their plan with some new requirements. Commerce gave jurisdictions the option to either develop a new plan according to the new guidance and incorporating the new requirements, or to complete an addendum or a crosswalk to basically map the requirements or the current plan to the requirements in the new plan so that everything is consistent. We opted for the addendum so that we can incorporate the new requirements rather than create a whole new plan, because there is a lot of good content in the plan. It took a lot of work, lots and lots of stakeholdering, and the strategies are great. So we want to keep all of that, but also satisfy these new requirements. So that's what I'm going to show you. This is just a cursory timeline of events that you can review. Obviously, there's much more detail within the addendum. The original plan was published. The new guidance came out. Commerce provided a consultant to jurisdictions who needed to come into compliance with the updated guidelines. So we worked with them to determine what the addendum needed to include to be in compliance. We developed the addendum over 2025, fall of 2025. It was initially hoped to be approved in December of 2025. We didn't get there, so now we're bringing it to you in March or February 2026. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the new requirements are, the first one is that we extend the planning period through 2030. So because we've done this addendum, we don't have to turn around and do a new plan after our 2023 plan meets the 5-year time and comes to the end of the 5-year timeline, where we will be good through 2030. So we won't have to start development of a new plan until then. We needed to organize the strategies and the content in our current plan around the state's objectives that they issued with their new guidelines. And Afyang, here I'm actually going to ask you to bump forward a couple of slides so that we can go ahead and take a look at those. I think that one more. Yes. Yeah, back one. Perfect. So these are the 5 state plan objectives that we needed to organize our current plan around. You know, these are all things that were already our objectives. I think Seattle's objectives, King County's objectives. We just needed to take what we have and show how they work to meet, basically which bucket do they fall in. And I'll give you a second to review those before we move on. Okay, Afyang, would you mind popping back too? Thank you. Sorry for that awkwardness. Okay. So there was some targeted engagement for the addendum. The vast majority of the engagement and the stakeholdering that was done back in development of the original plan. So in 2023. So you all can take a look at that. I won't read it all. If there are any questions, I can answer those now, or otherwise we'll just move ahead to the next slide. Okay, great, perfect. Actually, can we go back? I'm sorry, Effing. I wanted to talk a little bit more about some of the new components. Could you just one more? Yes, here. Thank you. I want to speak before we move on quickly to some of the new pieces that you will see in the addendum. One of them is the estimate of service levels. So that's something that wasn't in the original plan. It wasn't required. It is required now and in a particular form that you'll see in the plan. It's essentially a summary of current investments to address homelessness and housing instability, and broken down by HMIS type. So a lot like what you saw in some of the charts Kelly was showing with the budget, where it has the information broken down by the funding source and then by HMIS project type. That's the form that was required by Commerce for the addendum as well. So it looks a lot the same. The second additional component is the survey of funding sources. So this is both operating and capital funding, and also actual and potential. So not only funding sources that we're currently utilizing, but ones that we have available to us, but we are not currently utilizing. They want it all included in the addendum. So we pulled that information together. You can take a look if you want to review it again. It should be in your packet. The third new section is the estimate of permanent and emergency housing needs, and that incorporates the housing target data from the comprehensive plan. Which focuses on the availability and future needs for emergency housing, so for shelter, and also affordable housing, that is with an emphasis on 0 to 30% AMI, so affordability for those households, and with another emphasis on permanent supportive housing. So shelter, 0 to 30%, and PSH. And finally, the prioritization criteria that we use, or that City of Seattle and King County use, since they distribute the capital dollars, to prioritize which projects get built. So that is all now incorporated into the plan. Thank you. You can just go forward back to objectives and milestones, Effiong. Thank you. One more. So a priority that was it's not an additional priority, but additionally in the plan, since we were going in and making changes, we added this priority around building and reinforcing regionalism. So that's something that KCRHA has been doing. That's something that we will continue to do, and we wanted to make sure that it's reflected in the plan as a really important piece for us as a backbone organization. Next slide. And finally, we are tracking the current objectives in the plan, which you can see here. These are the metrics that were included in the 2023 plan. And we are going to, you can already find a lot of these they're dashboarded on the data page on our website currently. We'll continue to track them, and I believe that CEO Kennison is we're actively starting to think about how to track some other metrics and milestones as well. So you'll be able to see that in the future. And I believe, is there one more slide, Afyang, or is that? Yes, I can take any questions that you all have about the data or the addendum or the original plan. If I know the answer, I will provide it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Emily. And before we move to discussion, hopefully you all have resolution number 2026-02. What we're going to be voting on is resolved. The governing board hereby adopts the 5-year plan addendum entitled Strategic 5-Year Plan Addendum as set forth in attachment A. And section 2, this resolution shall take effect immediately upon passage by a 2/3 majority. So that's what we're going to be voting on. I'm going to be annoying about Robert's rules and ask for a motion and second before we actually do questions and discussion debate. So is there a motion to approve resolution 2026-02?
So moved.
And is there a second?
A second.
Okay, thank you. That just establishes that this is something that some of us want to consider. Okay. With that, I'm going to open the floor for questions or debate. I see Member Fain's hand.
Thank you. So thank you for that presentation. And I'm just wondering, with the responsibilities that have shifted since the original strategic plan, based on the updated interlocal agreement, how are we tracking who's going to be accountable and responsible for delivering those outcomes that we have in our strategic plan? And then how do we as a governing board evaluate the performance of those services?
I'm going to let Kelly take the first crack at the response.
Thank you. Yeah, as you're noting, Member Fain, this is a regional plan and it is held by KCRHA, but involves a lot of contributions that are not in KCRHA's portfolio. And so the original 5-year plan does have partners and lead agencies, I believe, and that's one of the things I think we can make clear as we dashboard and really, to your point, this board, I'm sure, wants to know how KCRHA is performing and how that contributes to or takes away from how our partners are able to perform what they do. And so would love your ideas of, if there's a different way that you'd like to see that.
Okay, and I put myself in the queue. So thinking about the slide where it had the metrics and then there was a column that said desired direction, decreasing or increasing. Do we actually have goals, like numeric goals or anything more specifically than that we want to see, homelessness decrease? And are there anything more specific than a desired direction on those metrics?
Someone should correct me, but I believe that the language in the plan sort of ties that to resource availability. And so, that's something we could do each year, is understanding the investment and what that sort of buys us, and then what we would expect based on data, based on research, how much we would expect the needle to move.
Yeah, just to build on that, CEO Kinnison's absolutely correct. When we look at the actual report out there, in addition to the overall trend that we desire, when possible, we would also like to see how these metrics are numerically broken down. So yes, that in the slide, it was a bit more broader, but when we look at the report, it does provide instances where, if possible, we could break it down into specific subpopulations so we could see where these trends are aligning.
Okay, just to follow up on that, though, it sounds like, so you're saying it kind of depends on budget. So it sounds like there's not kind of like a plan or kind of numerical specific goals that we're trying to shape the budget toward. It's more like, well, here's our budget and what we're investing, and so therefore here's what we can expect to see in terms of numbers changing. That's kind of the order of things.
That's right. The exception to that is the HUD metrics, which I think some folks use. Others I've heard, board members express discontent with those. But HUD has some metrics that certain program types should be meeting. So to the slide that Emily showed that has, basic kind of throughput metrics, we know what would be expected compared to performance of those services, across the country. And so we do present those to you all, I believe, in our quarterly data report, which we'll also be seeking some input on how those data are shown.
Okay, thank you. Member Aviva.
Dr. Kinnison, how, and maybe you just answered this, and I apologize because again, I'm still learning about KCRHA, but how do we monitor progress on the strategic plan? And then how are we also going to know what's prioritized with all of the other shifts and things going on? How are those decisions made about what aspects of the strategy or the strategic plan are prioritized?
Yes, great question. I had not answered that. So KCRHA is really organized around the strategic plan. So it includes our very basic functioning all the way up to more sophisticated strategies for addressing subpopulations, addressing racial disparities. And again, there is a lot in that plan. It is very comprehensive, which is useful. And the resources needed, vary depending on how ambitious one is trying to be in a given year and what's available. And so our vision is to kind of work with the board. We typically do a work plan that we submit to the board, usually by the end of first quarter after we've worked with you to see what your priorities are, where you would like us to focus. We know what the available resources are going to be. And then we put a work plan together showing what aspects we're going to be advancing in that calendar year. And you all approve that formally. And then we will start dashboarding that accordingly.
Okay, thank you. Next up, I see Member Jiang.
Great, thank you, Chair Wilson. My question is building on Chair Wilson's point. Is setting quantitative goals something that we could consider doing? I know that, potentially some of it is very much dependent on resources, but, like setting an actual goal could then lead to us saying, okay, we're not on track to meet it. And so what do we need to change to get there? Rather than just saying, oh yes, generally, we want people going into permanent housing to go up. We want homelessness to go down. Like, can we set goals and then, at least have some level of accountability for ourselves to try to, take actions to get there?
Absolutely. And this is sort of what my training's in, right? So the first thing we'd want to do if we are going to, lock in specific goals is understand the logic model of what creates impact. And if you're going to hold an agency, any program responsible for outcomes, they have to be under that program's control. So we'd want to be very thoughtful about what are the metrics for our system, what are the metrics for KCRHA, what are the metrics for individuals, right? It doesn't matter if the individual's outcomes aren't good. So that's a framework we've been kind of working on, introduced to the board at our board meeting last year. We'll have the follow-up conversation with you this year about how you're thinking about that, where you'd like us to focus. I mean, I certainly feel responsible for providing metrics on how KCRHA is performing. And, again, really open to feedback about how we want to think about that together.
Great. Thank you. And could you speak a bit to the difference between, how the system is performing versus how KCRHA is performing? And I understand that KCRHA is just one part of the system, but is there any one person who's responsible for the performance of the whole system?
There's not. I mean, the performance of the system, I don't know that we have a lot of community agreement on that. For example, when the PIT count comes out, there will be an article that says that, homelessness went down and so KCRHA is successful, or homelessness went up and so KCRHA is not successful. And that's something to get an easy click, but KCRHA does not have any leverage over who comes into the emergency response system. And we also don't control housing for the most part. So we don't control the in and we don't control the out. What we control is how folks are served while they are unhoused. And we've, been set up to work with the relevant partners, behavioral health, public safety, and others to make that system seamless for individuals. But when you're trying to, measure an output quantitatively, right, that's when it starts to get, needs a lot of thought.
Cool. Thank you.
And just in the homelessness response system, we control probably about 2/3 of the resources that our region spends. And I would say another third is in, various places in the city, various places in the county, private funded. So it's not all under a KCRHA umbrella.
I think it would be really a great opportunity if we could have opportunities for all of us to get together and come to sort of a common understanding of all the economic levers, macro, micro, and all the policy levers that come into play, and where the pinch points are, and sort of where you can apply pressure so that you can achieve goals in certain areas. It's very nuanced. I know that we all have different backgrounds and different levels of experience. If we could have an opportunity to kind of level out and come to the same understanding, I think that would be a good starting place.
Okay, thank you. Next up, I see Member Bracken.
Thanks, Chair Wilson. I would be really interested, CEO Kinnison, to have an opportunity, especially for the lived experience members on this board, to maybe inform the strategic plan a little deeper and a little more intentionally around the different populations that we're serving. I know that you and I have spoken about this, but we all know that there's not a one-size-fits-all solution. So, like, how do we use the dollars we have and plan in a way that is strategic for all unhoused populations?
Okay, I put my own hand up. I'll say something briefly and then maybe try to move us along unless there's anything urgent. I guess just to pile on a little bit more to this question of how we're measuring success, I haven't had a chance to read, every word of the 5-year plan and the addendum yet, but it does seem to me that there's a lot of just like really vague qualitative language when it comes to articulating our goals. And I understand the challenge of setting firm goals when the agency has very limited control over many things and is kind of at the whim of funders, et cetera. But it does seem to me that there is nowhere else that the locus of kind of regional strategy can sit. Like, this is kind of what the agency has been set up for. And so there has to be a way, even if it's not kind of articulating firm goals for the agency, there has to be a way that like the thinking can take place in this space that can inform like how can we better use these resources, even if the agency itself cannot make all of those decisions, to maximize the impact that we are having and the extent to which we are able to move the needle and really help people out of homelessness. Because if that thinking is not taking place here, I don't know where it's taking place. And it seems like a big problem to have really vague qualitative goals that, are we being more equitable? Are we, it's just very, very vague. So really eager to figure out how we can be a lot more specific and strategic, even if it's not within the power of the KCRHA alone to make the changes that we might recommend. And I see Member Foster's hand.
Thank you so much, Mayor Wilson, and I'm excited for this conversation. I just wanted to reiterate two things that feel important to me. One being the need to revisit the ILA that we have and to make sure that we as governing board members are supporting the agency in hitting the outcomes that are already named there. And I think that's definitely in our our capacity and our capacity as board members. And the other is, it's my understanding from previous conversations with CEO Kinnison that there are some recommendations or noticings that the agency has from its existing years that the CEO intends to bring to the governing board later this year. And so I do want to just name those as two opportunities that I see on the horizon for us to take a fine tooth comb and to look at some of those like system improvements. I know the strategic plan is quite high level in its intentions, and so I think we're all responding to that. But I do think we have those two opportunities in front of us as board members, and so I'm hoping that we can find ways to utilize those. And perhaps CEO Kinnison, it may be that we just need to know that we're looking at the work plan for the board for the year and seeing where those touch points already are. And I want to make sure we do that before we start to think about adding other approaches into the work plan.
Okay, and I see Member Baron's hand, and then going to really try to move us along because we have another agenda item.
Yeah, no, Chair Wilson, I hesitate to raise my hand. I just wanted to say that I've been serving on the board for 2 years, and I just hope for all the new members that I'm just super grateful at this conversation, because I think we've tried a few times to have this conversation. We haven't really quite been able to do it. So I'm very eager. I just wanted to point out that I appreciate the note about the metrics, and I think it is important. And I was reflecting, Mayor Wilson, that you've kind of set your own target for Seattle in terms of like the increase. And I think that's the part that I think is hard for KCRHA to do by itself, because it doesn't have its own revenues. We can't raise taxes as KCRHA. So it really does rely on the funders to be able to sort of set those targets. I think it'd be great to be able to have those conversations at kind of a regional level. And I agree with you that KCRHA could be a way to do that. But I also appreciate CEO Kennison's response that I think there's some things that like they don't have control over as an agency. So I look forward to continuing this conversation in other settings. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Great. So if there's no further urgent discussion, I'm going to close out and ask Afyang to take the roll.
Yes, Chair. Chair Wilson?
Aye.
Member Zahalai?
Aye.
Member Barone?
Aye.
Member Fain?
Aye.
Member Aviva?
Aye.
Member Foster?
Yes.
Member Rink?
Yes.
Member Bracken?
Aye.
Member Jung?
Aye.
Member Robertson?
Aye.
And Member Hay?
Aye.
Chair, the vote was unanimous.
Okay, great. In that case, we're now going to move into executive session to discuss matters related to RCW 423110 subsection 1I. As presiding officer, I'm announcing that we are slated to be in executive session for 20 minutes until 2:55. If the executive session is to be extended beyond that time, I will announce the extension and the expected duration. Following executive session, the meeting will adjourn. Executive session will begin now. So governing board members, please leave this call and join the Teams link that Afyang has put in the chat. Okay, are we all back? It looks like at least most of us. Good job. Great. So that brings us to the end of our agenda. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Chair, I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Okay, is there a second?
I second.
Any objections to adjourning? Hearing nothing, the meeting is now adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend.
Take care.
And our next meeting will be March 27th.